Okay, good evening from Washington. I'm Chris Stirewalt, filling in for Blake Berman, and this is the Hill on News Nation, and here's what we're tracking this hour. We are just days away from Friday's summit between President Trump and Russian ruler Vladimir Putin in Alaska, where Trump hopes to broker a deal to end Russia's war on Ukraine. We'll tell you what the president said about that in just moments. And what's the price of national security? 15%. Apparently, if we're talking about selling advanced artificial intelligence chips to China, we've got details on the new deal for Nvidia. Then, as the list of nations recognizing Palestinian statehood continues to grow, Israel's war cabinet lays out plans for an audacious move to occupy Gaza City to try to end the war, now nearly 3 years long. And the big story today, President Trump declaring a state of emergency in Washington, D.C., taking federal control over the city's police department and deploying the National Guard into the nation's capital.
This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control.
He calls it Liberation Day. Democrats calling it a dress rehearsal for dictatorship. We have team coverage. Joe Khalil is standing by with reaction from D.C. officials. But first we go, of course, to Kelly Meyer at the White House. Kelly, what do we know?
Yeah, Chris, we were inside that packed briefing room this morning when President Trump made this unprecedented announcement, federalizing the D.C. Police Department and deploying the D.C. National Guard. Listen to this.
It's becoming a situation of complete and total lawlessness. And we're getting rid of the slums, too. We have slums here. We're getting rid of them. I know it's not politically correct. You'll say, oh, so terrible. No, we're getting rid of the slums where they live.
Homelessness is down in the district 9%, and the president says he plans to remove homeless encampments from around D.C. and send homeless far away from the Capitol, but did not say where. And U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro says she wants harsher punishment for D.C. youth.
We need right now to make criminals understand that they are not going to get away with it anymore. I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are.
And we're learning more tonight about the deployment of the National Guard troops. They'll be sent out as soon as possible, we're told. There will be about 800 soldiers activated, 100 to 200 soldiers supporting law enforcement at any given time, we're told. And their duties include an array of tasks from administrative, logistics, and security support for law enforcement. The president also not ruling out sending in the military. Chris.
Thanks, Kelly. As for officials here in the district, they are not taking the news lightly. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser holding a press conference right after the president's announcement, voicing concerns about the move to bring the Guard into the Capitol, calling it unsettling. Joe Khalil joins us to discuss how lawmakers and D.C. officials are reacting to all this. Joe, what do you know?
Yeah, well, first, Chris, we've been talking to people who live here and business owners all across the district as well. Pretty strong consensus agreeing with those officials that even though some say crime is, of course, an issue in D.C., albeit going down and in the right direction, trending downward, they feel like this is federal overreach on their part. Certainly, even business owners that have been victims to crimes themselves have told us they feel like they do not want to see the National Guard on their streets. The vast majority of people said that. Muriel Bowser also expressing opposition, D.C.'s mayor. But if you expected we're going to fight back sort of rhetoric and tone that was a bit harsher, that's not exactly what we got from her today. Take a listen.
And while this action today is unsettling and unprecedented, I can't say that given some of the rhetoric of the past, that we're totally surprised. I can say to D.C. residents that we will continue to operate our government in a way that makes you proud.
And the mayor said she opposes this plan, but is going to work with the administration where she can. Meantime, D.C.'s Attorney General Brian Schwab more assertive in his criticism, calling this, quote, unnecessary, unprecedented, and unlawful, saying there is no crime emergency in the District of Columbia. Violent crime in D.C. reached historic 30-year lows last year and is down 26% so far this year. Chris, I'll just add the one entity within D.C. that supports this measure wholeheartedly, the D.C. Police Union, which says as long as it is a temporary measure, they think it's the right move.
Okay, Joe Khalil, we thank you. Joining us now, Republican Representative Laurel Lee from the great state of Florida. Congresswoman, I want you to listen to a bit of President Trump from today's press conference.
The police are standing, and they're told, don't do anything under any search. So and you can see they want to get at it. And they're standing there, and people are spitting in their face, and they're not allowed to do anything. But now they are allowed to do whatever the hell they want.
Congressman, what do you think the president means by the police can do whatever the hell they want?
I think he means that we need criminal justice policies that make sense. And what we've seen in D.C. is offenders, criminals who commit a crime and then are released on bond back out on the streets the same afternoon to do it again, or law enforcement officers who've been told not to even interfere. And all of us who spend time in the district know that violent crime is, in fact, a very serious problem. Just this summer, we've seen a series of tragic events of innocent people being gunned down. And this is our nation's capital, where not only those of us who live and work there need to be able to be safe, but also the people from around the world who come and visit us. So what I hear President Trump saying is that he wants to ensure that we are supporting our law enforcement officers, that we are giving them the tools, the equipment, the guidance, and the backup to do the job that they want to do in Washington, D.C.
Okay, but why now? I know there's a debate over whether or not the Metropolitan Police Department was padding its numbers and back and forth. But certainly we can say violent crime rates are no worse and maybe even a little better than they were, not during COVID. They're way better than they were in the post-COVID era, but they're as good or better than they were at the start of President Trump's first term 8 years ago. Why wasn't it an emergency then, but it is an emergency now?
Well, and any progress is certainly welcome. And I believe that Mayor Bowser shares President Trump's interest in overall community safety and in making D.C. a safe place. And so that's something that I think when we kind of cut through the noise and look at what does this look like, how does it work, I believe there's an aligned vision there, and that both the mayor and the president want to see D.C. a safe, livable, walkable place for everybody who lives and comes to visit us there.
Okay, on homelessness, the president says he's going to clean out the homeless camps. He's going to crack down. They're going to be taken away from the city. What do you do with these human beings, right? I think every city, every mayor of every city in America would love to know, what do you do with the addicted and the mentally ill and the people that don't have a place to be? Where do they go?
Well, no question. I think that is a large issue that as society as a whole, we need to be thinking about and grappling with, because clearly I know, we don't want to just put people in institutions, but at the same time, where are they going to go? Are they going to end up, committing crimes, incarcerated? We need to think globally about how are we going to deal with the problem of homelessness, and how are we going to find people places, whether it's mental health treatment, drug abuse treatment, any kind of intervention that is kind of help them get back up on their feet and get to a place in hopes of self-sustainability. So, one thing, though, that is clear is that what we cannot do is allow the presence of people who are homeless to become a danger or a threat to the law-abiding people who are just trying to go about their lives. And when we have large encampments or people there who are struggling with drug abuse, then the inevitable result ends up being that, in fact, they are a threat or a danger to some of the people who are just living and working in D.C. So I recognize that is absolutely a complex question that we need to be answering across every community in America. I know in my city, we're working on that too.
Okay, Congresswoman, we're going to have to leave it there. All right, America, if you were from Plant City, you would know her already. But if you don't, there she is, Congresswoman Laurel Lee. We thank you. All right, so for some reaction on this, who better then my colleague, our contributor, former D.C. Democratic Party Chairman Scott Bolden, counselor.
Former prosecutor, too, from New York.
Well, you didn't just find that suit. You come by this natural. So first, let's do the numbers. Okay, so here's the year-over-year decline. They're going to show it in the magic box right here. You're going to see it, and then we're going to talk about it. It's going to be great if I keep talking. Okay, so this is the number Democrats are pointing to. They say, look at how much better it was than in the immediate aftermath of the COVID catastrophe. Yeah. And there's now Republicans complain about some of the decreased numbers, and I'm not saying they don't, and I'm not saying there might not be some truth to it, but it's down certainly. But see here at the longer term. Look at this next graphic that's going to tell us the longer story. So crime is down. Mm-hmm. It is truly down. But it had to go way up. This is just murders, but I will tell you that other carjackings, violent crimes, other things reflect that similar trend. The huge COVID spike. So the numbers are down, but they're not down.
Yeah, but that graph right there isn't as relevant as the first graph you put up, because the basis for the president wanting to take over the police department is that there's this emergency. Yeah. And that's why the Attorney General for D.C. said it's unlawful, because he's got to make a finding of an emergency. Donald Trump has anecdotal evidence of people in his administration who have been victims of crime. But crime is down in most major urban centers. Yeah. And if you really want to solve the crime problem, make people feel safe, then you put resources behind preventing crime versus solving crime. There's a big difference. We know that a continuum of services for young people, giving them alternatives to violence, jobs, job training, entrepreneurship training, you name it, solves the crime problem. Okay. But locking them up, let me give you one more statistic. One more statistic. Per capita, the District of Columbia arrests more people per capita than other cities, right? And we also, along with that, the statistics show that locking them up, and we have more federal and local police already. So now you're still getting crime. So that doesn't solve the problem.
I think human nature may be immutable and undefeated. Okay, Muriel Bowser. Mm-hmm. The woman who we heard in that clip, the mayor here, I'm a D.C. resident.
I am too.
My mayor. Mm-hmm. I heard her. That was a very different Muriel Bowser than we heard at the first Trump term. The woman who painted Black Lives Matter square, she was the hotbed of the resistance. That lady was a different lady. Now,
it's a different Congress.
It's a different Congress, that's true. But also different is that if we were to take East Capitol Street down that way, we would get to RFK Stadium, and we would get to a billion-dollar deal, multi-billion-dollar deal that hangs on the federal government. And Bowser's plans for the district and everything that she wants to do, Donald Trump has a lot of say-so about redevelopment and all of that. Does he have her sort of over a barrel here?
Well, that's one issue. Yeah. But the broader issue is Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Yeah. Remember, we're a federal enclave, right? This administration could draw back or pull back on home rule, let alone statehood, which is we project out. And so that's really what she's got to manage. This is a very different administration, and they could pull that home rule right out from under her, and they have the votes to do it.
So you think if Democrats win in midterms, we'll see the old Muriel Bowser back?
I think you'll see more fight in her and more fight in Congress and more fight overall.
Well, you'll see more fight from Scott when he comes back for the full panel later on. Counselor, we appreciate your guidance. As always, coming up, Uncle Sam said AI chip makers like Nvidia couldn't sell China the good stuff. But now the tech will flow as long as big tech pays big bucks. Plus, a live look from Alaska, just days away from a crucial meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. A live report on what to expect, and a high-stakes game for Israel as its latest military strategy races growing international condemnation. We'll explain it all when The Hill returns.
We've been dealing very nicely with China, as you probably have heard. They have tremendous tariffs that they're paying to the United States of America, and we'll see what happens. They've been dealing quite nicely. The relationship is very good with President Xi and myself.
That was President Trump earlier today before signing an executive order to extend, again, the U.S. trade deadline for another 90 days. This comes as tech giant AI chip maker Nvidia, alongside the company's major competitor, Advanced Micro Devices, both agreeing to give the United States government a 15% cut of the revenue from sales in China. This plan reverses an earlier ban on chip sales to China, with the Trump administration citing, at the time, national security concerns. Although that move was met with some skepticism. Today's move was. One Wall Street Journal columnist saying President Trump is, quote, imitating the Chinese Communist Party by extending political control ever deeper into the economy. Here with us now to make sense of all of this is former Trump White House Chief of Staff and NewsNation political and economic contributor, Mick Mulvaney. Brother Mulvaney, my experience here is that people say national security when they don't want follow-up questions. And so whether it was the TikTok ban and now this, right? So they say, well, we have to do this thing because of national security. And then later when the politicians don't feel like it's in their interest, they say, national security, schmational security. So please decode this for me.
Yeah, no, I can't. I'm at a loss for this one. Here's where I'm coming from, Chris. Either it's a national security risk to sell these things to China, in which case we shouldn't be selling them to China, or it's not a national security risk, in which case we should be selling to China. Those are the two possibilities here. There's no sort of middle ground that says, well, there's a little bit of a national security, and you know what? We'll take the edge off by taking 15% off the top. The Roman Catholic Church tried that for a while. It's called an indulgence, and it didn't serve us very well. So I'm not sure where they're going with this, other than this is more state capitalism. This is along the lines of the sovereign wealth funds and the government ownership of private business. I think the Republicans are going to rue the day they've set down these examples, because the Democrats are not complaining about it. They're sitting back and taking notes. This is a dangerous path to go down.
Right, because if you say, I will grant you a license to make a bunch of money, but you're going to have to agree to kick some back special to us, that is an invitation to corruption. It's an invitation to all of these other things. Okay, but it does set a template. And, you look at the amount of lobbying that's going on in D.C. now and all of these things. There are a lot of people who would like deals like this, to get to do things that are dubious on national security or have been claimed to be, and other things, and use these exemptions. I take it there'll be more.
Yeah, flip it. I mean, look, flip it the other way. I was in the White House during the first term when we tried to ban Huawei. Well, what if Huawei comes to us and says, you know what, maybe we are a little bit of a security risk. How about we give you guys 20% of the cut? Is that enough to have our technology in your infrastructure? Is 25% enough? What's the number? This is really worrisome. Again, it's either a security risk, in which case there should be no sales, or it's not a security risk, in which case let the market go. But in no circumstances is this a type of thing where, you know what, it's a little bit bad, so we're going to sort of atone for the sins by taking 15% and putting it in the government coffers. That's not how we do things in this country.
Well, as I'm from the other side of the Protestant Reformation, I just want to tell you that I dug your analogy. That was excellent, Mick Mulvaney. We thank you for merging theology and politics ever so seamlessly. Okay.
I'm here for you, Mr. Stirewalt. We'll see you soon.
That's right. There is still much more ahead on the Hill. President Trump and his Russian counterpart are set to meet this Friday in Alaska. So where is Zelensky in all of this? We're live from Ukraine with an answer, plus this.
We have to beat these and we're not going to do it by playing nice. We got to be tough.
Oh, dear. That's Beto O'Rourke in Texas. Democratic voters said they wanted a fight. Have the Republicans finally given them one they can win? Stay with us. The Hill is coming right back. Welcome back. I'm Chris Stirewalt filling in for Blake Berman tonight. The world is holding its breath just days away from the long-awaited meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. The president saying it all may come down to a real estate deal.
There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody, for the good of Ukraine.
Our Robert Sherman is live in Ukraine's capital city with the latest. Robert, what do we know?
Hey there, Chris. Well, this is set to be a bilateral meeting between the Russian president and President Trump, with President Trump saying today that his goal is to come home from Alaska, not necessarily with a deal, rather with a clear understanding of whether Russia is serious or not. Here's the president today.
This is really a feel-out meeting, a little bit. And President Putin invited me to get involved. He wants to get involved. I believe he wants to get it over with. Now, I've said that a few times, and I've been disappointed. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war. You got to end it.
So the president says that if all goes well, he'll be getting on the phone with President Zelensky to tell him if a deal can be made or not. The ultimate goal is to get the Russian and Ukrainian leader in the same room together. Potentially, that room could include President Trump if needed. But tonight, the Ukrainian president drawing his line in the sand of how he wants all of this to go. This is a statement he put out saying, first, Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be respected. Second, issues concerning the war against Ukraine must be resolved only with Ukraine's participation. Third, Russia must take the necessary steps to end this war. So far, Russia has not taken a single step. With the president saying that likely, in order to get a deal across the finish line, this would require the so-called swapping of territories. This is why the Ukrainians say that they want to have the ability to participate in all these talks and negotiate the future of their country. Chris?
Robert, we thank you so much. Okay, here for more on this, of course, Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. We welcome you, Congressman. Thanks for being with us. What does the president mean by swapping? It's not like Ukraine's going to get land in Russia. We're talking about, it's all Ukrainian territory we're talking about here, right?
I think realistically, the president is saying that Ukraine will have to give a lot more land than Russia will, and it's not good. I think the president's normally a good negotiator with anybody else, whether it's Iran, China, or people in our own country. But with Russia, he gives compromises and concessions before they even meet. And I don't think it's good. So I hope this is a good meeting. I don't want to prejudge it. But this is one area where the president's been very unpredictable. And I think there is case for worry that he's going to side too much with Russia and reward Russia's invasion. And I will tell you, there'll be an uproar if that happens.
Okay. On another area where you have expressed some concerns. You've talked about how hard the tariffs were hitting your home state of Nebraska, and this was before the latest round of tariffs came in. You've told us you generally oppose the idea of sweeping indiscriminate tariffs, but now that hundreds of billions of dollars of tax revenue are flowing in, do you think some of that money should go back to your constituents in a kind of a tax rebate? I've heard different opinions here in Washington as the hundreds of billions of dollars in new taxes come in, that Americans ought to get some of that back. What do you think about that?
I would prefer not having the tariffs, the sweeping tariffs, just to raise basically we're taxing consumers, American consumers, and then what's being proposed is, okay, we'll take money from consumers, then we'll give it back to some of the consumers. I just think that doesn't make sense. We have to realize about 65% of all that revenue in the analysis that I've seen comes from Americans who are paying this tariff. Now, granted, about 20% is coming from the foreign companies that are sitting here. They're eating some of the increase. Then you have some of the companies here that are eating some of it. But almost 2/3 of the tariff money that's coming in is being paid for by American consumers. Tariffs are a tax on the consumer. I would prefer targeting our tariffs on particular countries. Sweeping tariffs, I don't think work. We learned that in the 1930s. And with the Smoot-Hartley Act, it was two Republicans who took us from a minor depression to a very damaging depression, creating a tariff war. And so I would propose, well, we need trade deals as fast as we can for Nebraska. We're an export state, and our corn and soybeans right now are being shut out of the market. And that's why Nebraska is on its heels right now. We've lost about 6% of our GDP, according to the economic numbers that are official, and that's not a good sign. And so if we can get some tariff deals and get these markets open back up, ultimately that's what we want.
Okay, I also want to get your reaction to this deal for Nvidia to sell these high-powered chips to China. Does that 15% cut that they're going to kick back to the Treasury do anything in your mind to lessen the national security risks here? I talked about this with Mick Mulvaney. I can't quite get my brain around this, that it was supposed to be too dangerous to give this technology to China, but now it's okay if they pay 15% for the privilege.
No, it's not all right. We got to realize we're in an intellectual war, a technology war with China. and we're in an AI competition. And so having Nvidia providing this technology to China is a mistake. And I also had I was leery of doing the chip-in bill, or the CHIPS Act, because that was a $270 billion giveaway to one industry. And now we're seeing some of the stuff's going to China. So Chris, I oppose it. I think we should. Taiwan's our friend. We ought to help protect them, because they're where most of this high technology is at. And I'd like to encourage you coming here, but China getting our chips is not a good deal.
Okay, Congressman, we will leave it right there. All right, America, if you were from Gretna, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Don Bacon. We thank you. Coming up, endgame for the Israel-Hamas war, or just another intensification? The latest on Benjamin Netanyahu's big gamble, and a judge rules against the administration's bid to unseal Epstein's grand jury testimony. Does the quest continue? The full panel is next.
News Nation tonight. Rachel Morin went for a jog and never returned. Now her killer finally learns his fate. And tonight, Morin's mother joins Banfield live. Does she think justice was served? Banfield, 10/9 Central, only on News Nation.
Welcome back to The Hill. I'm Chris Stirewalt, filling in for Blake Berman. One of the few issues that divide Republicans publicly in Washington these days is Israel. Australia just became the latest U.S. ally and Western democracy to say that it will recognize a Palestinian state at next month's United Nations General Assembly. They join a list that includes France, Canada, and Britain. This comes in the aftermath of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's announcement to take over, that they're going to take over all of Gaza City militarily, though he claims that will only be temporary.
Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza, free it from Hamas terrorists. The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas, lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages.
Okay, it's a move that has now been officially approved by Israel's war cabinet, and it raises huge concerns for the fate of those currently in the heavily populated area, with condemnation coming not only in the international community, but from many within the governing party here in Washington, D.C., the Republicans. Aha! The full panel with us now. Annalise Keller is a Republican strategist. You know Scott Bolden. We're going to keep talking. He's pretty good. Julia Manchester is she is not a national political reporter for The Hill. She's Jay Manch. She's here. And Hannah Brandt is a political correspondent for Nexstar, our colleagues. We have a stacked deck against you guys today. We're going to get you. Julia, I want to start with you. Israel, if you would have said to us 2.5 years ago that the war will still be going on, right, and that international condemnation, did you think that it could have gone this long, that we'd still be in this? I thought that Israel had a short clock, but they've had a pretty long clock.
They've had a pretty long clock, and I think it's the length of it isn't, doing anything for Prime Minister Netanyahu right now. Right. He's facing pressure on a number of fronts. First of all, he has the hostage families in Israel who are very unhappy with how he has handled this, and he has the international community very unhappy about the humanitarian crisis that's unfolded in Gaza. And then on top of that, you have these horrific images of the starvation taking place in Gaza, which is putting pressure on, a lot of U.S. officials, U.S. lawmakers, and sort of resulting in a number of Republicans not, speaking out against Israel, but becoming more unusually critical of Israel. So when you have Republicans starting to turn on Netanyahu, that's when he's really backed into a corner.
Yeah, and
the White House has shifted on this as well, right? We saw President Trump really not take a public stance on the very issue of, Israel going into Gaza City and taking it over. So that's interesting, too.
So about that, here's what Thomas Massey, Republican from Kentucky, said. Israel's war in Gaza is so lopsided that there's no rational argument American taxpayers should be paying for it. With tens of thousands of civilian casualties, there's a moral dilemma, too. I vote to stop funding their war. Republicans really enjoyed it when Democrats were suffering with this conundrum, right? And how it plagued first Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, and divisions within the Democratic Party about how to proceed. Now it's the Republicans' turn to do this. Is this real schism? Is this just some stuff people say? What do you make of this?
I mean, that's a good question. I would note that there was a group of Republican lawmakers who was in Israel just last week while they're on recess. They're over there making trips. So it's not like all of the support from the Republican Party is gone. Certainly, notably, the Speaker of the House was there, and he did get some flack on social media for being there instead of being at home with his constituents.
Yeah.
But there's still, you know, a large base of support in the Republican Party for Israel.
Okay. All right. Now, Democrats are enjoying, it is true, watching Republicans finally have a few things to be divided over. And Democrats are sort of feeling good vibes about they've got a fight that maybe they can win down in Texas, right? This redistricting fight, they feel pretty good. What did Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, what did he have to say? Let's listen to him.
What Texas is trying to do is, again, violate the Voting Rights Act. We didn't. A map was passed, and it was done at the end of the census. You talked about how rare it is to do what he's doing. Yes, it is. What's even rarer is to do it at the behest of the President of the United States, who's clearly attempting to and says that he deserves to have 5 more seats.
Scott,
he needs 5 more seats.
You need to find him.
Right.
Scott, you're an Illinois native. You are so that makes you an Illinois Democrat. J.B. Pritzker is shocked to find out that there's all this gerrymandering going on. Illinois is the most gerrymandered state. You couldn't. You couldn't fit.
We vote 3 times too.
Yeah, exactly. So, first to the hypocrisy argument here. That what Republicans are saying, in Texas, we're going to do some kind of heinous gerrymandering, and it's pretty bad, but Democrats did it first.
Yeah, they do, but here, this is just a naked power grab. You usually do it, and statutorily, usually in most states, you do it at the end once the census has taken place to give it a nice bow and a nice package. Here, this is a naked power grab, and it's not going to work, and if it does work, then it's going to be a race to the bottom, right? Because California is going to do it, Illinois is going to do it, and you could have 600 House seats, if you will, when it's all said and done, maybe 500.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Well, more democracy is always great.
That's right.
But it's not a good look. I anticipate that this is not going to happen in Texas. There's either going to be a deal cut or both sides are going to have to walk away. I understand what the president is trying to do. It also gives a precursor that he believes, and the Republicans believe, that the House is really at risk here and that the House could go Democratic next year. And if that's the case, that's going to be the political pushback on this authoritarian president we have.
Annalise, good news, bad news for Republicans on this. The bad news for Republicans on this is that they have given the Democrats something that unites them, that their base can finally feel good about, that they're fighting back and they're doing all, they can have press conferences, they can issue letters. There's finally something that looks like Democrats are doing. So there's definitely the backlash problem that Republicans may be getting for themselves. The good news for Republicans, Beto O'Rourke is back. The good news for Republicans is that Beto O'Rourke has returned from what I assume was a long run to clear his head, and he is back in Texas politics. Talk about the strategic pluses and minuses for Republicans here.
Yeah, I want to go back because, you know, there is the truth that it is a bit of a race to the bottom now. I completely agree with you. But the issue is that Democrats have already done this in all of the states that they can. You have states like New York. You have states like New Jersey. You have states like Massachusetts that have no Republican representation.
Before the census, though.
No, you're right. It's unusual in the time that they're doing it. But now we've kicked off this process where we have Republicans who can go and do this in other states where they haven't done it, like Missouri, where I think there are fewer opportunities for Democrats to do that.
But we keep hearing Republicans say no, right? Republican governors are on the... So the original idea was, well, J.D. Vance is going to go out and tell them what to do, and then they're going to do it, right? And it sounds like Indiana said, thanks, but no thanks. We'll cook our own popcorn. And state after state, Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire said, not going to happen here. Are we overstating how broadly this could all go?
I think there are some exceptions to that. I think Florida is certainly a state to watch. I know I always bring it back to Florida.
You people just got your map. Ron DeSantis just got his map in July. They want another map?
They want another map, and here's why. You've had obviously a lot of population growth in Florida. In South Florida and in the Orlando area and just outside of Tampa, you have a couple of seats that theoretically Republicans could put Democrats more on the defense on. But that being said, when you look at the states like Indiana, New Hampshire, pushing back on the administration, I got to wonder what those phone calls, if those governors are going to hear from President Trump and sort of if there's going to be a pressure campaign.
And this is also part of the president says he wants a new census, a new super duper midterm census that doesn't include illegal immigrants.
Yeah, well, certainly that's a different conversation, but I wonder too if the conversation changes if California and New York are successful. If Texas is successful,
New York
is this
can't do
kind
it
of
for
dominoes?
2 years. New York can be ready for 28, but the California and Texas are locked in their eternal death match between the two. Okay, guys, hold on, because the key ruling in the Jeffrey Epstein case, we're going to explain about that. And on Elizabeth Vargas reports, the man who murdered Maryland mom Rachel Morin was sentenced to life in prison today. Elizabeth will speak live to the sheriff who helped put him behind bars. That's next for you here at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Hill will be right back. Welcome back. Let's get caught up on the stories that are currently trending on thehill.com, starting with, of course, Trump to seize control of D.C. Police Department, activate National Guard, as we talked all about earlier in this show. This is getting a huge amount of attention online, which is probably pleases the president quite a lot. Also trending, Trump, quote, looking at reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug. In a movement started by the Biden administration, President Trump could make marijuana a Schedule III drug, lessening criminal penalties and opening up some financial avenues and all that stuff. And finally, judge refuses Trump administration's request to unseal Ghislaine Maxwell's grand jury materials. And for this one, we are going to need our panel back on this. Okay, let's start with J.D. Vance and what he had to say about the meeting that took place around this matter.
I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country. And that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit.
Well, there, Beto O'Rourke's not the only one who gets bleeped on the show today. Okay, Scott, we have to start with you as a legal question. The president said that there, but he had also said before that they were going to ask for the grand jury testimony to be unsealed. I suspected that that was kind of phony because grand jury testimony, which the judge, I expected him to deny today. Were you at all surprised that the judge denied the unsealing?
No, not at all. In fact, the two judges have denied it, and both have alluded to how disingenuous the arguments by DOJ were.
Right.
Where you balanced the public need for the information versus the privacy piece under 6A, and they just weren't buying it. And there were only two witnesses in this grand jury. I never thought the grand jury testimony would be something that would feed the masses or the MAGA crowd. It's the files. It's the list, if there is one, and it's what who is Trump in there and what's he doing in these files, which is what the public really wants to see.
All right, so Annalise, well, here's what one of the Epstein accusers said about those files Scott's describing.
The files should be released. I'm tired of the government saying that they want to release them. So please just do it.
Yeah, that's what. To Scott's point, they could. The Justice Department has paperwork that it could release. They say to the court, release the files. The court says no, and they say, well, I guess what can we do?
Release the testimony.
Yeah, release the testimony, and they say, but we're not going to release the files.
Yeah, I think that's why there's so many questions around this and why people feel like something's being hidden. On one hand, the president is trying to sort of change the conversation here. He's talking a lot about what's going on in D.C. He's getting the National Guard involved. But a lot of members, and what I'm hearing from Republicans, remember, they're back home. Their constituents aren't really worried about what's going on in D.C. They're not paying as close attention to what's happening in D.C. What they're hearing and what you're seeing on their social media and responses, and they're hearing from their constituents is about Epstein. So that just tells me when they get back to Washington in September, that's going to be something that's unresolved. And, as to your point, there's nothing to feed the beast here. So they're going to have to deal with it.
Julia, speaking of when they come back, they'll come back, and James Comer, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, has, much like Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive, he wants a hard target search of every outhouse, doghouse. They're going to bring Bill Clinton in. They're going to do everything else. Smokescreen, real probe. Is this spreading the blame around to try to take the heat off Trump? What is that?
Well, I think there certainly are members of the Oversight Committee that want more information released. So maybe, but at the same time, there are political considerations to keep in mind, and that it does help. I mean, maybe take the pressure off of President Trump. That being said, though, I do think they themselves feel like they are under pressure, but they're also under pressure, I would say, somewhat to come up, obviously going into the midterms, to come up with some sort of a message. James Comer has also called on D.C. leadership, including Mayor Muriel Bowser, to testify or appear before a hearing. So he's got his hands full.
All right, Hannah, quickly, this is pretty cringy for Dems, though, at certain points when they're out there doing the kind of conspiracy theorizing they used to accuse Donald Trump of.
Well, yeah, they're kind of leaning into it. But I think it's interesting that Speaker Johnson, on his way out, was basically like, well, we'll hold the vote when we get back if the White House doesn't do more on this. There's not been new information released. It doesn't look like it's going to be. So do we see Speaker Johnson come back and call for a vote? Or do we see him try and change the conversation because the White House wants him to?
But his own constituency of members of the House, there are plenty of them, as Julia says, that want an answer, and they want it now. Yeah, the discharge petition.
Still there.
Going. You're not allowed to be a legal expert and a procedural expert, Scott. You've got to choose. You've got to choose. To govern is to choose. Hannah, we thank you all so much for being with us. Thank you at home for watching The Hill on News Nation. We're back tomorrow at 6 Eastern. Elizabeth Vargas Reports starts right now.